Chapter 16. The Convention Center. When they returned to the marble entryway, a small crowd of official-looking adults were gathered and conversing.
"It's about time, Brisk," a black bear jibed. "Let's get the show on the road."
"In good time, Ty," the president said with an indulgent smile. "We have a special guest with us today, and I'm afraid I have some bad news." He introduced Jack and divulged Dr. Walraven's death to the group. They responded with gasps and groans, looking amongst themselves. Mr. Bear, the brown dog that had arrested Dr. Walraven, looked to Jack in stunned disbelief. "Unfortunately," Brisk continued, "we don't have time for grief just yet. I believe our young visitors are already at the convention center. Let's not keep them waiting any longer." He gestured toward the doors, and the crowd began to file outside. Alan, who had been standing at the back of the room, strode next to Jack as they entered the daylight once more.
"How did it go?"
he asked. The monstrously transfigured face of President Brisk still seemed to loom before Jack. Had it been a hallucination? Maybe the events of the last few days finally catching up with him? Alan's cold reception didn't exactly give Jack much confidence that he wouldn't think he was crazy, or maybe he still hadn't forgiven him for Dr. Walraven's arrest. Either way, he shrugged. It was fine. They walked around the edge of a glass lake, and finally arrived at what looked like a military warehouse. A 3-story tall sliding door was pushed open, with letters stenciled across it that read BLDG E4. Just before the doors, the crowd of invited applicants were gathered. Their numbers seemed to have doubled. There must have been 1,000 of them. Jack considered that many of these kids would have come from the south.
"Attention!"
An adult voice called from among the crowd as the president's entourage approached, and a gradual hush fell, all heads turning in their direction. Brisk made a forward motion with his flippers, and crystal shards began to form along the ground. The shards ramped upward, and the small group moved onto the slowly materializing platform of ice. Jack hesitated, but Alan put a paw on his shoulder and guided him forward. The crowd before them began to talk excitedly amongst themselves.
"Silence!"
the same voice called out, and the hush returned.
"Welcome,"
Brisk projected, beaming down upon the crowd.
"We thank you for joining us on this exciting occasion. For the past 5 years, the Sidekick program has been shut down. Today, we open it back up. You have all been invited here because you are the best."
Applause erupted, and Brisk smiled indulgently before continuing.
"We are honored by your presence, and wish every one of you the very best of luck. And remember," he paused for dramatic effect, "we seek not your power, but your will. All of you have shown that will by being here today, and for that we thank you."
The crowd erupted once more. President Brisk stepped back, nodding to Alan, who replaced him at the front of the ice stage and spoke in a dry, matter-of-fact tone.
"You will be competing for an apprenticeship with one of our brave heroes. This morning you will participate in the first of 2 trials. Those that succeed will move on to the second trial, after which our department heads," he turned and indicated the crowd on the platform, "will make placement decisions. You will use your skills and antenna to complete these tasks. As long as you do not harm your fellow competitors, you are encouraged to do whatever it takes to succeed." "So who's ready?" bellowed the black bear.
The crowd burst into excited applause once more. Alan waved them down.
"Allow me to explain how the first trial is going to work." He gestured beyond the crowd to the large open doors. "You stand before the newly refurbished convention center. Inside, you will find a large warehouse floor filled with obstacles and training instruments. Our staff have placed envelopes, similar to the invitations you received, throughout the space. Think of it as an egg hunt. These envelopes will be difficult to reach. You will need to complete a task in order to access them, so don't go looking under a mat or behind a box. Explore the room until you find a task that suits your skills. Collect an envelope, and you will be directed to the second task." "So let's get this party started!"
the bear yelled. The crowd cheered and began jostling each other as they filed in through the giant door.
"Jack, I can't tell you how sorry I am,"
Mr. Bear said as they followed the president under the shadow of the building and into a large, sprawling gymnasium.
"I just want you to know, it's a loss for all of us. Animal control won't be the same without Dr. Walraven."
Jack mumbled with a stiff nod. He wasn't angry with Mr. Bear, but he'd defended Dr. Walraven, and now he knew he had been guilty. Facing his accuser was a bit awkward. He was saved from having to make a further response by a fight that had broken out just ahead.
"Because you're an all-force cheater!"
a blue jay swore, pressing up against a much smaller frog.
"That envelope is mine, and you know it, you slimy little punk!"
"If it's yours," the frog taunted, "why am I holding it?" He wagged the envelope in the bird's face. Several of the bird's friends protested angrily.
"What's going on here?"
demanded Mr. Bear.
"This little punk is a cheater,"
the blue jay said, bumping chests with the frog, who pushed him back.
"I was flying up to grab that envelope. It was on a wire between those two poles."
He pointed up to a cable 60 feet overhead, spanning between two support beams.
"This little pond dweller jumped onto my back as I was flying, then jumped off of my back and grabbed the envelope before I could reach it."
"Worked, didn't it?" the frog sneered, holding his arms wide as if inviting an attack. The jay shoved him again, his friends once again yelling angrily at the lone frog.
"Hold on, break it up,"
Mr. Bear said. The frog and jay broke apart, turning toward the dog.
"Now, it sounds to me like,"
he started, then leaned in to read the badge hanging from the frog's neck.
"Willie here used his skills to reach the envelope first. I regret that he used physical contact, but it's not technically against the rules. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. President?"
Brisk stepped to the front of the crowd, looking between the two.
"Most impressive," he nodded to the frog. "You've shown initiative and resourcefulness. Just what we're looking for."
"But, sir,"
the jay protested. Brisk cut across him.
"You can stand here and complain, or you can move on and look for another envelope. I recommend you get going. All of you," he added, looking around at the crowd.
As they dispersed, grumbling, he turned to the frog again.
"Good luck on the second task, Willie,"
he said with a nod, and he led his group past the beaming frog. They walked slowly through the warehouse, observing groups of kids attempting every imaginable task. Some were racing through transparent pipes filled with water. Others transformed their bodies to fit through impossibly small gaps in walls, or else passed through jets of flame emitting from torches set into the floor. Jack watched as a group of teleporters took turns attempting to pop into a 10-foot bell jar with an envelope on a podium inside. With each failure, they roared in frustration and slammed their fists against the glass until a teenage bear hooked his claws beneath the jar, toppled it with what must have taken immense strength, and snapped up the exposed envelope to the disbelief of the onlooking teleporters. At the far end of the gymnasium was a row of glass walls like enormous microscope slides. They formed transparent hallways that each led to a steel door in the gymnasium wall. Two familiar figures were outside the leftmost hall. Sprint was crouched like a marathoner waiting for a gunshot, pointed into the hall. Hoover stood behind him, watching apprehensively.
"You're gonna hurt yourself again,"
Hoover warned, clicking his claws together.
"No pain, no gain, Hooves,"
Sprint responded.
"I don't think that term is referring to broken ankles,"
the anteater said uncertainly. Jack broke away as the president's group filed past, stopping next to Hoover.
"Hey." "Hi, Jack,"
Hoover said, not taking his nervous eyes away from the squirrel.
"Mr. Roberts,"
Sprint acknowledged, in a tone that suggested he did not wish to be disturbed.
"What's all this about?"
Hoover sighed.
"Oh, well, he discovered switches on the ground. When he steps on one,"
he pointed toward the steel door at the end of the hall,
"the corresponding door slides upward. There's a podium inside with an envelope on it."
He looked back toward Sprint, clicking his long claws together nervously.
"But the moment he releases the switch, the door slams shut."
"Couldn't you just go in and grab it while he's standing on it?"
"You too?"
Sprint said. "A little faith, please. We can't all sneeze our way to the next trial."
"Sneeze?" Jack asked.
"Yeah,"
Hoover said, withdrawing a silver envelope from his pocket and holding it up.
"I got this earlier, sort of by accident."
"By accident," Sprint said, shaking his head.
"It was inside a big cement block,"
Hoover explained.
"I got some dust in my nose as we were passing it, and, well, anyway."
He looked back at Sprint with concern.
"His leg is pretty bad from that fall earlier. He already crashed twice. I think it's getting worse."
"I'll show you getting worse," Sprint grumbled.
He stomped on a square switch in the floor, and the steel door at the opposite end slid upward. He crouched so low his chin was nearly touching the ground, his tail arched high. And then, with a sudden whoosh, a reddish blur zoomed through the glass hall. The steel door dropped instantly, slamming to the floor like a guillotine, but not before a loud clang could be heard, like a wooden spoon banging on a pot. A moment passed, and a door within the door swung open. Sprint came limping out, the envelope held high over his head. His eyes were shut, and he wore a pained grimace on his face. "Am I holding it, Hooves?" he winced through gritted teeth. Yes." "Good," he said as he opened his eyes and dropped his arm. "Because I'm gonna need a medic." When the pair had limped away, Jack turned and jogged to catch back up with the president's group. They were standing near an open space in which a strange kind of obstacle course was constructed. A raised balance beam stretched across the space, the kind upon which a gymnast would perform. Wagon wheels rotated around the beam, with gaps between their spokes through which a fast mover might pass. From below, foam pads swung up on curved arms, punching empty air in the spaces between the wheels. At one end, a staircase led into the beam, and at the other end, yet another envelope podium was positioned. A burly ape jogged up the wooden steps to the encouragement of a small group of onlookers. "Come on, Fred!" one of them called. "You got this!" The ape took a tentative step onto the beam, waited for a gap in the first wheel, then charged forward. He stopped, arms flailing to catch his balance, waiting for the next wheel. Dodging through, he stopped again, then darted forward. This step was mistimed, and he took a padded punch to the hip. For a moment, it looked like he might recover. He stuck his hairy brown arms outward again, standing completely sideways on the beam. But the spoke of a wheel caught his extended arm, knocking him off balance, and he fell to the blue mat below. "Too big," Brisk said. "The gauntlet isn't meant for jock types. It needs someone smaller, quicker." "Someone like Jack," Alan said. The president met Alan's eyes, then turned and observed the rabbit. "Yes," he said in agreement. "Yes, someone like Jack." Jack's heart skipped. No, I couldn't." "Skill and timing are only a part of it," Brisk said, stepping toward Jack. "There's another element. Guts." He jerked his head toward the course. "Give it a try." The eyes of every animal control official were on him now. Some, such as Bear, gave encouraging nods. A slender, sharp-faced cheetah woman frowned doubtfully at him. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the mat. From the top of the stairs, the gauntlet looked even more impassable than it had from below. Spokes turned and battering arms swung with such consistency, it was impossible to see the podium on the other side. "Hurry up, man!" the ape called from the foot of the stair. "I want to give it another go!" Jack looked at the nearest wheel. There was just enough room between the spokes for him to fit. Brisk was right. It was remarkable that the ape had made it through the first wheel. Well, if he was going to fail, he thought, he might as well fail fast. He bounced on his toes, took a breath, and darted forward. He made it. A spoke brushed the back of his shirt, but his big bare feet made balance simple. Wide eyes fixed on the next wheel, he took another breath and darted through this one as well. Filled with a new confidence, Jack made it through the next obstacles without error. But it became increasingly challenging the further along he got. In the final section, the wheels and punching arms were positioned so close together there was no space to stand between them. Once he started, he wouldn't be able to stop without getting knocked off. The podium was just visible, the silver envelope perched on top. Fail fast, he thought to himself. He crouched, held his breath, and rushed forward. He passed the first wheel, then a punching arm, narrowly made the gap in the next wheel. The podium was only feet away. A punching arm clipped his shoulder. He flailed, but caught his balance without stopping. The envelope was just beyond his grasp, a few more inches. Wham! A spoke of the rotating wheel caught his side, and he toppled sideways. As he fell, a punching arm swung upward, striking him directly in the face. It was padded, but he saw a flash of light as it connected with his muzzle. He was flipped around, banging his head on the beam, and dropped to the blue mat. The wind was knocked out of him. Then, as he lay on his back, gasping for air, something slapped against his face, something made of silver paper.
"Well done, Jack," Bear said. "It wasn't exactly Eddie Dixon, but you managed."
He extended a paw and hoisted Jack to his feet.
"Well, if that wasn't the luck of the rabbits," Brisk said as his entourage approached, "then I'm a pigeon."
Jack looked down. In his paw, he clutched the silver envelope. "But how? I didn't make it to the podium."
"When you were knocked back by that pad, you collided with the beam," Bear explained. "I guess you must have knocked the envelope loose."
Jack looked up at him. "But it's not mine, then. I got it only by chance."
"Whatever it takes,"
the black bear said, smiling over Brisk's shoulder.
"Looks like you're moving on to the second trial."